Hello everyone and welcome to 350 after spring break. Hopefully you enjoyed it. As promised, it is Wednesday and I am going to give you both your notes for yesterday's class and tomorrow's. So we talked about John Locke and we're going to talk about Vico. So those are the two things we're going to do in this video today, which means it might be a little bit longer than normal, but hopefully it is helpful to you either after or before you've done the readings that were assigned for the week. I hope you had a great spring break, and let's get right into what it is that we need to talk about. Really what we're talking about with these two theorists is language theory, how language works, how language impacts the rhetorical nature of our communication. So let's start with John Locke. Some of you may know that John Locke was a philosopher. He was a preacher. He was a well-respected academician. And so he actually wrote a lot of things that are extremely important to us even today. For example, he was the one who came up with the idea that everyone deserves to have a right to life and liberty. That is how he influenced the Magna Carta, which most of you know influenced the Declaration of Independence, which starts off with that that we all have that right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So he really influenced our government systems and the way that America was built to separate itself from England. In addition to that, he also wrote what's known as social contract theory, that idea that we enter into an agreement when we enter into a conversation, pretty much, that we agree to treat each other a certain way. We agree not to murder each other or maim each other, that we have a general sense of how we're supposed to function in society in a way that works and in a way that is beneficial to everybody. And that social contract theory is studied in political science as well as sociology and philosophy. What we're going to focus on was John Locke's writings about theory of language. And so the work that I had you read for yesterday, is based on his essay on human understanding. I say based on not because it's not his words, it's just an extremely edited version. The book length essay is incredibly difficult and boring to get through. So that is not something I would ever want to make someone read who wasn't, honestly working on a PhD or a higher degree. So you're getting just a snippet of what he wrote in an essay on human understanding. Now, the thing that's important for you to know is that it is my job to present to you what I think is the key component of his work as it is relevant to the study of rhetoric. And so this essay here, the edited essay that you're getting, is really, I think, a pretty good selection that your authors make, the editors make, to include. And hopefully you will be able to identify some of the things, the key ideas that I'm going to introduce to you now, because it is my job to say, hey, let me take all this complicated stuff and make it a little simpler for you to understand. So I will do my job now. And hopefully you'll do your job of reading and listening and then hopefully understanding. That's one of the ways that we learn. As you know, repetition leads to learning. But what leads to understanding? So John Locke begins by telling us that language is inherently complex. He talks about how there's so many meanings for words, and he identifies 4 specific problems with language in this work. The first problem with language is that there is no natural relationship between a word and its object, or a word and its idea. In fact, you have to go through a process, a 3-step process really, when we get from word to idea, in that we have a word that signifies something that refers to something else. There's a number of reasons for this that I'll get into, the most important of which is that there are two kinds of language. There's basically two functions for language. There's the philosophical and there's the civil. Philosophical language is that language that we have sort of internal to ourselves. The language that this word means this to me. Whereas the civil function of language is external. It's that thing, those words that we use and that are supposed to represent something in the mind of someone else. For example, think about the word dog. What do you think of? You may think furry, you may think four-legged mammal, you may think wagging tail, some of you might think barking and biting, slobber, long tongues, messy, smelly breath, dog food. Some of you might think cat. Some of you might think of other animals. Some of you might put it in context of your own dog that you've known. But I'll tell you what none of you are thinking of when I say the word dog. At least I'm pretty sure. You're not thinking of a 72-pound Collie Lab Dalmatian mix who has the Dalmatian body, so that high end that they have in the back, a collie tail, so it's long and bushy, with the white tip on the end, the collie nose that sort of comes out and has white on it, and the white beard and the white diamond on the back of the neck. And everywhere that there's white on his paws, there's brown Dalmatian spots, but he has the boxed ears of a lab, and his name is Corky. And I can almost guarantee you're not thinking of that because that's what I'm thinking of. That's my dog. So when I say dog, that's what I think of. And so the dog I was raised with, I should say, he is no longer with us, but he's the dog I identify the most with. And so when I hear the word dog, that's usually what I think of. I have a friend who every time she hears the word dog thinks of boxers. I have another friend who every time she hears the word dog thinks of Shih Tzus. Like, it just depends on what your relationship is to that word. That's not too hard to understand, but it does cause us trouble because there's no natural relationship between the word dog and whatever object or idea we're trying to refer to or signify. So our philosophical language can be problematic in that it's not received in the same way that our civil language is. The intent and the meaning are probably different, and that is because language is not based in nature. The second problem is that a lot of times we have one word that can have multiple meanings. We have one word that represents a myriad of things. One of the words that I talk about a lot is the word sick, the word bad, and the word cool. Now, cool generally refers to a temperature that people feel or the weather outside, but other times we talk about cool as in an aesthetic that we might have. Or one of my favorite sayings is, I'm losing my cool, meaning that I'm no longer calm and cool about a situation. I'm starting to get my Irish up, as they say. I might be getting angry. I might be getting upset, or I might become defensive. The word bad, when I was a kid, meant bad until Michael Jackson came around in the mid-'80s, and then it meant good. Oh, wow, that's bad. That means good. When I got to college, somebody said, wow, that's really sick. And I was like, what are you talking about? And of course, sick meaning that it's good. And I've heard other examples, examples of this all the time, that words have multiple meanings. And we will get to those multiple meanings and where they come from in a moment. The third problem with language is that you can have many words that mean the same thing. So you can have a number of words to describe the same entity or idea. For example, you have a string of colors together: red, yellow, orange, or yellow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And some people say, well, that's a rainbow. Others will say that's a prism. Others will say that's a fractal. Others will say those are the colors that represent a particular flag, or colors that are in our crayons, right? Or there's more colors than that. Just that simple one word, for example, rainbow, can have a lot of meanings, right? But rainbow, prism, flag, rainbow flag, Roy G. Biv, all of those things are referring to one idea or one concept. So the fourth problem with language is that because there is no natural relationship between a word and its object, because there are multiple meanings for one word, because there's multiple words with one meaning, all of that brings us to a point of trying to understand how words are put together. And that's problem number 4, that words are put together in sentences and that meaning changes or shifts. Okay? So the fourth problem is that we try to put these words into sentences. They're very complex. And there's no way for us to represent every single thing with a single word. So a single word cannot represent the complexities of the idea that we're trying to share or communicate. Now, language, according to John Locke, it's made up of words, of course. The words, is that the smallest block of communication of language that we have? Well, no, the letter is, right? But letters in of themselves do not signify anything specifically, not generally, right? When we put them into a certain order, then they become words which have meaning. And when we put those words in a certain order, then we have a completely different idea of what's being communicated. So if my philosophical meaning and the civil meaning that is received, they can differ greatly, because there's no way for me to know exactly your experience or your intention or your meaning of one word or over another. We pile more language on to try to understand, by the way. And John Locke says that's not the way to solve these 4 problems with language. In order to solve the complexity, the numerous words that have the same meaning, the numerous meanings that get assigned to one word, or the fact that there's no natural relationship between a word and its idea or object. In order to get through that, he says that we have to purify language. Now, what does he mean by purify? Well, he means that maybe we should have a limited number of words with a limited number of assigned meanings. And we shouldn't deviate from that. In other words, we should have denotative meaning. Now, I know when you're in the 5th or 6th grade that they told you that denotative means dictionary meaning, and I'm not going to tell you that that's wrong, but we're going to make this a little more sophisticated, okay? So, what do we really mean by denotative? It means the generally agreed upon meaning of words. You take all of those agreed upon meanings and you put them into a book, and we call that the dictionary. So a dictionary is not just denotative words. It does not denote words. A dictionary is a collection of agreed upon meanings. Now, who has agreed upon those meanings? Well, at first it was Mr. Webster, right? or Mr. Merriam and Mr. Webster, or however it was that it worked. Essentially, it was learned men, academician, the academy essentially decided. And that meant white, male, landowners, rich, educated men. Obviously over time, that changed and that shifted. And it changed and shifted with our culture as well as with our progress as the human race. Okay? So when we talk about connotative meaning, I know a lot of times that we identify that as contextual meaning, but it's a little bit more complex than just contextual meaning, because you can look at a word in a sentence and say, oh, by context, I can figure out what this means. But here's what's missing from that definition. Context isn't just the context of the sentence. It's the context of the whole meaning as it exists in our culture, as it's referenced in subcultures, depending on the context in which we're using it. And that's how language changes and shifts over time. So those dictionary meanings, well, there's more words in the dictionary now than there were 20 years ago. Why? Because we've added words. We've added words that we've agreed to the meaning on. For example, when I was a kid, bling bling meant the sound that a telephone made. And by the way, that is kind of what it sounded like. But now bling means something completely different. And it's in the dictionary as those meanings, right? And so it's important for us to understand that John Locke was writing in one moment in time. And he was trying to find a way to get rid of these multiple problems that we have with language, because he says language is necessary. I hope you're sitting down for this brilliance. It's necessary for communicating, which is not a big surprise to anybody. Now, I will tell you that my definition of communication comes from Pearson and Nelson in 2000. You don't need to know that. Pearson and Nelson in 2000 said that communication is the creation and the sharing of meaning, the process of creating and sharing meaning. Well, if that's the case, if that's what communication is, then if we have words that suffer from these four problems, and if we have language that suffers from these four problems that John Locke talks about, we can't communicate. And do I believe that what John Locke was trying to say is that we can never communicate? No, I don't believe he was trying to say that. Instead, I think he was trying to say that we have to consider that there may be multiple meanings attached to the words that we use to signify one or more ideas. And so he believed that we needed to communicate in order to engage that social contract. And so that's how it all fits together for him in sort of the political sense, is that language theory is the way that we engage the social contract. Because letters join to make words, words join to make sentences, the grammar of those sentences join the context and culture and everything that we as individuals philosophically experience with those words, and somehow meaning comes about. Trying to share meaning requires more communication then. So, John Locke identifies that there's two functions of language, philosophical and civil. And he identifies four problems with language. That there's no natural relationship between a word and its object or idea, that one word can have multiple meanings, that many words can have the same meaning, and that most ideas and objects are too complex for us to represent with a word, or even with a couple of words. So the complexity of nature, the complexity of things that exist, and the complexity of what our mind does with language makes this a process that's almost impossible to understand. So he says that what we need to do is purify the language. Get the meanings of some words that are agreed upon that we will use. And then we'd be able to solve those four problems. So that's John Locke. I hope that that was clear. I'm going to give you a moment to finish up your notes on John Locke before I move on to Vico. So Vico, he addresses a very specific person in his work, which is the study methods of our time, on the study methods of our time. Vico addresses Bacon. And he's talking to Francis Bacon. Remember that guy with the faculty of psychology and the four idols, false idols from truth? That guy? So one of the problems that Vico had with Bacon was that Bacon came up with the Baconian method, which was science at the time. A way of experiencing and measuring science, life world, nature, the truth, and then claiming that we have some certainty from it. Now, at this time, there was the development of some scientific tools. For example, magnifying glasses, the reading glasses. We've got the telescope, not the microscope yet, but we've got the telescope. We're able to see the stars closer. We're able to make the world smaller. We've got mapping going on. We think we understand what the world might look like a little bit more. But the reason that we understand that is because of the study methods that we have established. Now, Vico was writing in the modern era, and he believed that there was a question that was inherently very important to ask. That as we progressed in science, we really needed to focus on this question. Who finds the truth better? The ancients, who used their deduction and their artificial and artificial proofs and used induction and questioned and sometimes questioned and questioned and questioned until there was no answer, which it almost seems to be what a lot of times Plato does with Socrates. And he, says we get to this point of stasis, which is where we're supposed to find truth in dialectics. But at that point, we have to make a choice, according to Aristotle. And that's where rhetoric comes in. And so Vico's asking the question, which one of these is the better way to find truth? He's actually asking the question, what is the rhetoric of understanding science? So he's probably the first theorist and philosopher to come up with this idea of the rhetoric of science. Now, you might be asking yourselves, what is that? Well, it's very simple. Whenever there's a scientific breakthrough, or there's a discovery, or we make a claim that we believe to be true, we test it using scientific methodology, right? Usually the scientific method of deduction, and we test theories. So it's hypothesis testing is what it is. When people do that, they then have to explain to us what that means, okay? I can't go out and do every social science experiment that I want to do, but what I can do is study one or two things and methodologically answer those questions and try to contribute to our knowledge. But we have people who look through microscopes who find things like the God particle, right, that explains everything. You've got Oppenheimer who looks at the world and sees that everything about us, quantum physically speaking, everything on the quantum level is moving around. And if you saw the movie, this would sort of be that moment where he's lying in bed and he's kind of freaking out because all these lights are flashing back and forth. And to be honest with you, I still don't understand quantum physics all that well, but that actually helped me understand quantum physics just a little bit more. At least I now know what quantum mania from the Ant-Man movies actually meant. Hopefully you understand some of those references. But the idea that we could explain a scientific thing or idea, theory, or discovery to the general population. I love that we have gone through so many different paradigms just about food. I mean, at first, butter was the best thing you could eat, and then it needed to be replaced with margarine, it had to be replaced with oleo and fats. Then no, it has to be replaced with margarine because we need less fat. And then it was, no, margarine's bad for you. What you really need is butter. And we've gone around and around and around. It's kind of like that whole debate about, are carbs good or are carbs bad? And the problem with science a lot of the times is that it's a black and white issue. It's a yes or no answer. Take Ozempic. It will work. It'll be great for you. You'll lose a bunch of weight. Wait a minute. You'll also have all these other side effects that are going to kill you, so maybe not. Well, Ozempic was not designed to be a diet drug. It was designed to help people who are diabetic control their blood sugar, particularly type 1 diabetics. That is the group of us who don't produce insulin or don't produce enough insulin to live, no matter what we eat or how many carbs we cut or anything else. Like, literally our body does not function properly. So it's for those people to help them get their sugar levels down. Well, the side effect of that seemed to be weight loss. It happened in a significant number of cases that people lost weight. Well, I could tell you this, as a diabetic who takes Ozempic, first of all, yeah, I lost about 15 pounds, and that was it. And I could stand to lose a lot more. I did not lose 30 pounds in 20 days, or whatever it is that people claim. I am a type 1 diabetic. It has controlled my sugars in a way that I have never had before. And I'm so incredibly grateful for that. One of the side effects to Ozempic, besides weight loss, which doesn't always happen, is also another condition called gastroparesis. Well, hey, good news, I already had it. So taking Ozempic wasn't a big risk for me, and in fact has proven to be extremely beneficial for me. A bunch of my friends who took Ozempic to lose weight, they're not diabetic. Let me tell you something. They lost weight. They lost a lot of weight, a lot more than I did. And good, I guess. But they also ended up with gastroparesis and other conditions. They ended up losing too much weight too quickly. They ended up messing up their metabolism. What happened? Why is this the case? Why are some people so on board with Ozempic and others not on board with Ozempic? Well, we took science and we said, here's what the results of this science are. And then we used those arguments, that data, those inartificial proofs, to create an argument, an advocacy. And nobody took the time to realize or to tell anybody that, hey, the original intent of this drug is not weight loss. Therefore, if you take it for weight loss, there may be other negative side effects. And we didn't talk about that. In the rhetoric of the science, we did not get at every potentiality or possibility. And that became problematic for some people. And this is very, very true of a different drug. The name is escaping me at the moment. A friend of mine who is not diabetic took a different drug, and it cost her a lot of money. And at first it seemed like she was losing weight, but then she started getting sick. And I mean really sick, like I had to take her to the emergency room sick. And it turned out that it was all because she was taking this drug. And that drug just isn't healthy, apparently. At least not for her, right? And so what is the rhetoric of science? It's argument made on the averages, the law of most likely, right? Because remember that rhetoric is about probability. So Vico says, hey, the rhetoric that we are using where we say that we are scientifically certain that this is true, is that better than the philosophers and the ancients who believed in continuing to ask questions, continue to seek out more answers, to never be certain? In the end, Vico argues that the best way to get to truth is not through the modern ways of doing it, not through being certain, not being to a certain degree of certainty, as they always say in court. You know, the medical doctors always say within a certain degree of scientific certainty. What the heck does that mean? Within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. These things, he says, don't get us to the truth, because once we say we're certain of something, we no longer ask questions. We no longer search for the possibility that we might be wrong, there might be something better, there might be a different way of doing it. So his argument is not that we shouldn't do science, not that we shouldn't use instrumentation to answer questions scientifically, not that we shouldn't use scientific methods, even the Baconian method. He was not saying we should throw those away, but what he was saying was that we should never say that we are certain and we know absolutely, positively a truth. Because once we start saying that, we stop looking and asking the questions. If you go back to Socrates supposedly said that I know because I know that I don't know. And one of the things I always say is that college professors are not that smart. We just know where to go to find answers, right? We are trained in trying to find answers. We are trained in asking more questions. That's what we're trained in. In the study of philosophy, there's never any certainty because you're always asking the next question. And that's what Socrates said was the best way towards truth, through dialectic. And that's what Vico is saying, is that the rhetoric of science relies too heavily on certainty in the modern times. And what we need to do is to have that rhetoric of science acknowledge that there's more questions to be asked. So I hope that makes sense to you. Vico, who was an incredibly sickly man, actually, most of his life he was stuck in his room reading books and writing, and he was actually very worldly, but he addressed his work specifically to Francis Bacon. He is saying that the modern scientific methods that they had and that we have now made us feel a sense of certainty. And when we feel that certainty, we stop seeking the truth. And he said that is inferior to the way that the ancients tried to get to the truth by continually asking questions and never being certain of an answer. So the ancients win. Okay, I hope that helps. I hope that you all read and you understood at least a little bit of that, or that after this, watching this, you may go back and read and understand it a little bit more. And I'm going to stop there because I have no idea how long I've been talking, but I'm sure it's long enough. As always, if you have questions, let me know, and I will see you next week. And also, just a reminder, your paper is due Friday by 11:59 p.m., your first paper. And second, a reminder that your exam is coming up. Your second exam is coming up. And again, it will be the same as last time. You will have a week to take it. It will be open note, open book, open lecture, open everything. And you could take it on your schedule when it's convenient for you. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to call, text, or email, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you don't hear from me within 24 hours, by all means, contact me again if it's a weekday. If it's on the weekend, give me 48 hours just in case. My bonus daughter is in town for her spring break right now, so I am spending a lot of time with her. But I'm checking and getting back with people within 24 hours during the week. So let me know if you need anything. Otherwise, see you next week.